Hello and welcome to a world building diary. This is going to be the first in my series of world building diaries. The reason that I'm making these videos is not because I want to become super famous or, even for other people to see these. It's just as a resource for myself. And also because this is quicker, more easy to do, and hopefully more fun to do than to, do a write-up on this kind of stuff. So today we're going to be going over the climate system of the world I've created. There is no official name for this world. The characters in my upcoming novel will just refer to it as the Earth, because I don't like being... I try not to be, I should say. I try not to be pretentious, and I don't want to give this world some sort of silly, over-the-top name. They just call it Earth. It does have a in-universe name, which is based off the language that these individuals speak, which is the language I call Agarthan. That might be a placeholder name, but the language of Haiga, or Agarthan, would call this world The. Or, if you want to be extra fancy, Thedrin Fa, which is Earth 'neath heaven. So this is a tidally locked planet. As you can see, the pink to dark blue spectrum denotes the temperature. Then the thick black line denotes the coastline, and the smaller black lines denote the topography. Essentially, the bluer, the colder, the pinker, the warmer. And then the saturation of the color, whether it is dark and saturated or if it is light and unsaturated, denotes rainfall. So the white areas are desert, and the darker areas are rainforest of both hot and cold varieties. The darkest area here, this little bell curve, as you can see, that would be the dark side of the planet, whereas this hill shape is the light side of the planet. So, because it is a tidally locked world, it is always facing its own star in the same direction, sort of like how the moon always faces the Earth. This means that it never turns away, and the center of the world is always facing the sun. So instead of our world, where the top and the bottom are cold and the center is warm, the equator, it's not quite like that. It's more of a bullseye, where the closer to the center of the world, or the center of the sunlit side, is warm, and then as you go away from it towards the night side, it gets colder and colder. Now, this is not meant to be scientifically accurate to a T. It's more so scientifically inspired. I wanted to make this sort of inspired off of real-life science, but I personally don't find doing math very fun, which is funny considering I'm a math tutor. Regardless, It is supposed to be scientifically inspired, so you'll see things like maybe the temperature isn't exactly how it should be, maybe the fact that there's a giant volcanic continent constantly spewing out ash should cause like a global extinction, but that's not really the case. It's more so it's more so scientifically inspired. So to begin, we go with we start at the beginning here, the pink. This is the hottest area. The theory I have here is that the oceans would be so hot they would begin to boil over. But before they could boil over, they would of course have a rain cycle and evaporation. This would cause massive storms. These storms would thus cause the albedo of the region to go up, that is reflecting the light off because of the white clouds. And so there is a permanent giant hurricane here, which is constantly being fed by the very warm ocean. This prevents the basically the water attempts to boil, and then it forms a giant hurricane, and the hurricane and the rain and the clouds causing a reflection then cool the planet back down, or at least this region of the planet back down. So we can see that here in the satellite map. So this is the satellite, what it would look like from the surface, but this is with some clouds. So as you can see, and of course it's not designed to be totally accurate, But yeah, so this island here is in the eye of the storm. It never rains, but because it's super warm, it has a mist that comes up, which causes it to be a warm, lush paradise, which is always facing the sun. It never rains here, and it is hot, humid, and sunny the whole year round. Now, these areas barely ever see the sun, and so as you see here with the pink, that denotes fungal forest, or a sort of fungal jungle. And since it never stops raining here, the terrain, of course, is very jagged with fjords, and it's very cut in. So then we get to this plateau here, which is caused presumably by tectonic plates. I've not done tectonic plates yet. And if you see the light blue lines, those denote rivers. So there is another storm system here, although it's smaller. And this lake here begins to boil over, similar effect. Before it can boil over, it causes a storm system, which then cools it back down, and that coupled with the hyper hurricane, which is constantly feeding rainwater to the mountain ice caps, it causes a tremendous amount of rivers, which flow into this lake, creating basically a hyperactive nutrient system here, making this steppe area, it's kind of got a climate like maybe Ukraine, with this lake being much warmer and wetter, and then two deserts to the north and south here, away from the the small storm system. So this area, despite it being in the center and of the world, is not actually that hot due to its high elevation, and thus it's sort of a steppe placed in this world's analog to the equator. Now, the storm system flows clockwise. So the storms do pass over the mountains, but after that they begin to dry out. And when they come down the mountains here, they form this white area, which despite being very warm and near the coast, is nonetheless a desert. Think of this sort of like Somalia. Again, it's not 100% accurate. It's just supposed to be real life inspired. And so this area is sort of got a climate like that of Somalia, where it is for the most part barren and desert, though there are some splotches of greenery around the rivers here. Now, as we go up, there is a rift valley here, pulling apart, which provides a narrow inlet to the sea here. Another storm system forms here, but the water isn't as warm, so it's not as extreme, and because, of course, the winds blow clockwise, this side is sort of a savanna climate, but this side is a desert. So think of this more like, I don't know, West Africa, and then this is East Africa, or like Nubia, Egypt, and climate, more so Egypt. Then, as you get a little bit closer to the night side of the planet, you get sort of a Mediterranean, and yes, this is Turkey, Greece, and Italy. I designed the map shape by compositing maps of various different planets over on top of one another, and then tracing over it to form the topography. As for the mountains, those were all hand-drawn. So this is sort of a Mediterranean climate, where there's enough, rainfall for there to be, agriculture and trees, but it's not quite enough to form, like, dense forest. And then more Mediterranean climate over here. Then let's go back over here. So this area receives the brunt of the rain. However, by the time it gets here, it's cooled off, and so this is more so of a temperate forest. Now, you'll notice that the water temperature is warmer than its surrounding land temperature, as the ocean and the coast regulate the temperature. So the areas around the coast are going to be more temperate, even if they are in hot or cold climates. And yes, this is Korea, Japan, and China. Though this area does receive enough of a rain shadow to form a desert climate, sort of like this one here. But the desert isn't quite big enough to cause some of the issues we're going to see later with the larger of the deserts. You then go up here, and, this is a cold cool forest. Think of this like Canada or Russia or maybe northernmost Europe. And on the other side of the planet, it's not something too dissimilar. Not quite as rainy as the other side, but it's enough to form a lush and, green forested area surrounded by steppe land. But then we come beyond the, large lake system here, surrogate for the Baltic Sea. As you can see, this is clearly Scandinavia with the mountains here. We then get to the massive deserts. Now remember, the wind patterns, they don't change. The hurricane goes across the entire world. The difference is, of course, its strength. It's, of course, super strong in the center of the world, but it still blows, and so there's a tremendous amount of wind. However, once that wind goes over the mountains, it becomes incredibly dry, causing immense dust storms, which basically make the areas aside from these rivers and the coastline around the inner sea and the coastline over here in the northern regions, and I say north, but that's more of an anachronism. The way that you would navigate in this world, because it's always facing its sun, is you would say sunward, which is closer to the center, then you would say iceward or nightward, which is closer to the night side of the planet, and then because the winds blow clockwise, you would say vental, which is going the direction the wind blows, or countervental. Though you might hear me slip up and say east and west instead of vental and countervental and vental. These deserts are incredibly hot during the day, probably to the extent to where they're totally uninhabitable, and then at night are barren and frigid. Though I do have some intentions of world-building cultures that, because of the high winds, perhaps use the sand, which, because it is always baking, is probably very fine, I imagine. Might be wrong about how deserts work, but some sort of sand sailing society, which sail on the sand dunes with the massive wind gust. By the time we get here, there's sort of a contrast between the cold air coming from the night side of the planet and then the warm air, that it causes rain and condensation, though eventually it's too cold for most plant life to exist except around the coast, and so it's more taiga with mosses and lichen, but there is a band of lush and dense forest which stretches between the twilight zone of taiga and the massive deserts, which of course are surrounded by a steppe, and all of the fun things that, steppe peoples entail. Though I intend for this world to be inhabited by more Mesozoic, at least in most regions, Mesozoic life, I do have ideas about perhaps large megafaunal mammals living up here in this colder area. Then we come down to here, which this continent does not have life. I intend for this to be more of a Silurian-based continent, where perhaps around the coast you might find large scorpions, or you might find some small rivers or such, but this is a volcanic continent. As you can see, these massive volcanoes spewing out ash, and yes, this would probably cause mass extinctions, realistically. However, I simply have the bellows of volcanic material being swept up into the winds and then carried off to make these river systems over here and the steppe as well the most fertile part of the planet, because it's being constantly fed nutrients from the volcano. Again, scientifically inspired, not scientific. And I thought it would be cool if I made the river systems here rivers of boiling lava. Then, when we come over here, these are just some islands which form part of a continental shelf, which is unexposed over here. Then, if you notice this splotchy lighter blue color, this is algae. Whales primarily dominate the other side of the planet, at least the area where you can see more algae, though this is thermal algae. It feeds off of the thermal vents and then is bioluminescent. Once you get beyond that, there's just a giant ice sheet on the other side of the planet. If you're wondering why there's no landmasses on that side, it was simply more concise to draw in the daylight zone. As you can see, I tried to make somewhat of a circular shape with how the landmasses come together. I believe that is all that I wanted to cover. But yeah, because it's always raining over here, the terrain is very jagged. You could think of it like the, I'm going to mispronounce the Signy de Bermehia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but the rocky spike forest in Madagascar, which I don't believe is caused by erosion, but I nonetheless have a landscape like that, or the, super rainy planet that the characters visit in Star Wars Rogue One. I believe that's going to be it for today, everyone. I might post another video later about the Agarthan language, but yeah, these aren't meant for an audience, these are just meant for my own record keeping. So thank you, and if I may conclude in a prayer. Dox Santo Patri Katequio Katu Agio Pneumati Kathos and Arche Nuke Tonaionas Tonaionon Amen. Haire Maria Ke Haritomene Hoskeries Metasu Iulogomene Suen Gainaxi Kaiulogomenos Hescarpus to Jesus Agia Maria Metatitheo Presehumai Hupermonte Martulon Nunc Caetatin Hora Tofanato Amen.